Hi 206 students, this is for those of you who weren't in class today, Monday, September 9th, or were in class and you want to review any of that attribution stuff I went over. I'm going to kind of do some of that presentation again here. For those of you not in class, you should watch this entire video as it has to do with the lesson that we gave in the homework, which is due in 1 week. And talks about teachers in the schedule also. I'll review that first and kind of quickly just to say, if you look at the daily schedule here, or you go to week 3, which is where we are, and you look at it there, you'll see that yes, for today, Monday, September 9th, we were supposed to have a Carly Newton visit, but that has been changed. She's going to be here 1 week from now. She'll be here on the 16th, in other words. So that handout you got with the stories, writing the questions for her visit, all that stuff applies to a week from today. So it applies to the 16th. So that's been delayed. So what was due today was the chapter quiz. Most of you did. If you didn't, do it right away. You read the New York Times Daily. Do the current events quiz. There was a current events quiz due last week. There's going to be one due next week. I showed everyone about how to use the print PDF, Control P for print PDF in your browser to get the PDF made of that. Get an early start on Newsroom 101. In a week from next class, a week from Wednesday, the whole AP style unit of Newsroom 101 will be due. So should be working on that now. It's actually assigned next class, but we can say it's assigned now. So it'll be due a week from next class. Okay. Also, what else did I say? Should read chapter 3 and prepare for the quiz. Yes, for next class, of course, there's a quiz towards the end of the week. Actually, the quiz will be due, as you see if you went down here. The quiz will be due before the start of class on Monday. Here's the Newsroom 101 stuff. You don't do it here. You go into Newsroom 101, but you have to complete all the many sections of the AP style unit for Wednesday. Then the current events quiz, of course, is due on Sunday, this coming Sunday. And then there's homework that's due on Wednesday, like next class, by the end of the day Wednesday. I'll talk about that in a minute. It has to do with this, what's happening next class. Okay, a warning about that. Next class, as it says here, Wednesday's class, I am going to be away. I prepared a video for you, which is actually available right here, and a handout, which is available here. And from those two things, you'll do this little exercise. Do a little bit of a story write-up based on some notes and so on, some suggestions I make. This is not meant to be something you spend hours and hours and hours doing. It could take a couple hours for sure. But so you watch the video, you have the handout, you build a little story, and you put it here. Because this is the thing that you would have been doing during class that day, and perhaps just after class. I've made it due by the end of the day Wednesday. So that's an early homework assignment. Things are a little juggled because of this change with Carly not coming today. So I'll talk to you about that in the video. But this other assignment, the attribution thing, is a little bit longer term. It'll be due in a week. So otherwise, look over the schedule. A lot going on as usual. Remember, this is a 4-credit class, so it is meant to be a little more intensive than your normal 3-credit classes. All this stuff happening with Newsroom 101 and so on is in the background. You should be expecting that's going to take another credit's worth of work. Let's go get going on that. Okay. I hope that gives you the background, that sort of thing. Let me talk about attribution. Here's some of the text I used in the lesson from today, which I'm not going to bother retyping all of it, but I'll go through it a little bit, sort of a presentation format. Oh, I should probably get the other presentation itself up, though, also. Let's get this thing out of here. I don't want that. It's in here. Hold on just a minute. Okay, one reason to start you off with attribution is, although it's details that in the overall big picture are not that important, because most important is getting good information, getting good sources, getting good quotes, which are hard things to teach and take a lot of practice and persistence, really, to learn. Yet when you get that information, when you get those quotes, including them properly in a story is an obstacle for many beginning writers, because attribution is something in journalism style attribution, which is not like research papers or something. We don't have any footnotes. We don't have any stuff in parentheses. We don't have any bibliography. So we need to put our attribution, show our research, show who we talked to and what they said in the flow of the narrative of the story. And that there's a lot of rules about that to make it go smoothly and possible errors that you can make. So we use attribution for direct and indirect quotes. And you could say, as perhaps a third category of those could be partial quotes, but that's a kind of direct quote. So when I write, I think ties are a noose that our constrictive culture uses to control us. Sounds like I'm really angry about that. I say, Jack Downs said. Notice that's he said order. We always do the he said, she said order. We never say, with an exception, said Jack Downs. We don't say said he. We say Jack Downs said. On first reference, it's always the full name. On second and later references, it's always just the last name. Even if I have a title or things like that, you don't say on second reference Dr. Downs or Lecturer Downs or President Downs. No, from then on it's just Downs. Okay, good. So those are key things. And you should be perhaps taking notes of this because you have to do some of this stuff. On the other hand, I could just write, ties are a piece of fashion that our culture uses to control us, Jack Downs said. Is that attribution? Is that a quote? Yes, it is. It's an indirect quote, what we could call a paraphrase. It's the idea I expressed, but not the exact words. Why do one or the other? Well, frequently when you take notes or record people, they don't speak very efficiently, as maybe I'm not speaking so efficiently right now. So we often find that for a lot of basic information, it's a lot quicker and better. You can word it better. You can do a better job in writing yourself than that person did in speaking. So we only use quotations that show emotion or personality or special words used in a special way that help to illustrate that person. So we choose quotes carefully, and we only use a few quotes, usually direct quotes in a story. But we could do paraphrase. We could use the information and just use, again, attribution. And whereas we almost always use attribution after quotations with a comma and quotation marks, right? In direct quotations. In paraphrase, we could just say, Jack Downs said, ties are whatever, and do it like that, too. Oops. Okay, so it's more flexible also about how we create it. On the other hand, what if we just want to use some of those words? How about the word noose or constrictive culture or something like that? Well, I don't think that, honestly, I think this quote would probably be good on its own, just a direct quote. But if for some reason you have a quote that you like a few words that are really special and important, but the rest of them are not, then you could do a partial quote. You could use 1, 2, 3, a small number of words from a direct quote and use them as a partial quote. Then whether you give a comma or not, or a period at the end, remember commas and periods, they'll always go inside quotation marks. Whether you have a comma or a period kind of depends on the sentence. Downs said the ties are a noose that our constrictive culture uses, that our culture uses to control us. If you didn't want to use the word constrictive. And you're doing that because you want to make sure people know the word noose is the one that Jack Downs used and not the one that you're using. But also because it shows how upset he was about it or something, perhaps. So that's partial quotations, indirect or paraphrase, and direct or full quotations. Okay? These are almost always at least a sentence, even though they don't have a period at the end. They are sentence-like, and so on. All right, talk about basic punctuation. Do notice that colons and semicolons, they're rarely at the end of quotes, but if they ever are around quotation marks, they go outside of them. Periods and commas are always inside quotations, always, always, always. And question marks and exclamation marks, well, it depends. Let's use a real example of something and show some problems at the same time. Look at this quotation. I think ties are a noose that our constrictive culture uses to control us. Jack Downs, a journalism lecturer who is known to wear shorts. In fact, even in class I wrote, wear frayed shorts, as I did. You could say frayed dirty shorts to class, said. What's the problem here? We don't ever want to split the he or the she, the name, the word, the person, from the word said, from the action. Okay? We like that, that direct connection between the person doing the saying and the action that they're doing. It's not grammatically incorrect, but it's pretty ugly to put said at the end like that. This is a situation where you're introducing a person and using a quotation and describing them at the same time. You have to ask yourself, is that doing too much? And it may be. However, if you really want to use that structure, this is bad. This is okay. This is what we call inverted attribution. And it's why some people get the idea of saying, said he, said Jack Downs. The opposite of what we're supposed to do, right? This is the exception. I think ties are a noose that our constrictive culture uses to control us. Said Jack Downs, a journalism lecturer who is known to wear shorts to class. We really want to get that description, when it's a long description, at the end. If it's just lecturer Jack Downs, it'll just be lecturer Jack Downs said. But if it's a much longer description, as it frequently is, and we love long and meaningful descriptions, then you want to get it after this action and who's doing the action, the subject-verb situation, right? The he said. But to do that, we have to invert it. But remember, this is the exception. It should be rare and only in certain circumstances, because this is probably a better way to deal with it. Jack Downs, a journalism lecturer who is known to wear shorts, frayed dirty shorts to class, dislikes business attire. I think ties are a noose that our constrictive culture uses to control us. Said Jack Downs? No. In fact, you don't even probably need any attribution, but you could just say he said. All right? Or you could just perhaps, I think in the first time I've quoted, you probably want to say he said, but at some point you could potentially leave the attribution off altogether if it's obvious that I was doing the saying. Okay, good. So let's move this down a little bit here and go to the next page, because I wanted to show you something else. Let's say that we next had a sentence that ran like this. And honestly, this would also show me that you got way too much quotation in the story. You would probably have more narrative in here about how most instructors dress and how most students dress, or I don't know what. This is doing a story about how people dress at college. But for my example, even if we had other stuff in between, if we next come across a quote that says, I come to work dressed for business. When students see me, I don't want them to say, who is that slob? Well, the problem is, of course, this is not Jack Downs speaking. Whenever you change speaker, you need to let us know who's going to speak next. How are you going to do that? You have to introduce the person. So the first person who speaks, you can get away with a quote that you then do attribution afterwards, and maybe description then following. Second, later people who speak in a story, you need to introduce those people. So how do we do that? Well, let's use this example. We could say, Dr. Jonathan Slater, a professor who teaches public relations, said dressing in a tie and jacket shows respect for the college and the students. And if you know Jonathan Slater, he always dresses very snappily, unlike me. And then you could say the quotation. Also, this is a place where I wanted to mention, when you have a quote within a quote, it is single quotes. And we continue the single quote like that, but we usually will remove the space. It's be obvious that one is the single quote, and then the whole quote has to end. Whenever we have a quotation, we have to end the quotation. A quote within a quote is single quotes. Okay? Public Relations Professor Jonathan Slater said. By the way, well, actually, we wouldn't have to do this whole thing now, right? We could say, we just say Slater said, or he said. Notice that public relations and professor are not capitalized. And notice that here it's not Dr. Slater. It's just Slater. Remember now, titles are only capitalized when they come before a name. And they're only capitalized if they are truly a title. And professor is a job description, not a title. What's a job description? What's a title? Look it up in the style book. You should be looking all this stuff in the style book. There's a fantastic area on quotations, on quotes, how they're handled. You know, there's a great punctuation section which has a lot of this stuff in it. So please look at the style book. You're supposed to have one for class. And then we continued along here, and I changed that also. So this is just to say, notice in all these examples, I've only said. I didn't use explained, related, stated, declared, exclaimed, claimed, admitted. And I definitely said said and not says. I wrote said, and you are to write said also. There will be some places where you might say added or chuckled when it's really appropriate maybe or something. But normally said is fine. Said is good. And we use past tense because it already happened. You're describing something that already happened. We don't say says unless it's a saying that someone always says. What's wrong with these other ones? Did they really explain? Only if they really explained. Related, that's strange. Stated is like State of the Union. Declared is also, like these two are both extremely formal, someone at a podium. Exclaimed is really like yelling. Claimed is dangerous. It means it may not be true, and admitted suggests wrongdoing. So these words all carry lots more meaning. You have to make sure you use them correctly, if at all. Running into a quote. Dr. Jonathan Slater, a professor who teaches public relations, said, if you really were going to do this grammatically, you'd have to have another comma there. You'd have to have a comma before the quotation began. Wow, that is terrible. By the way, we've got to change our single quote there and another single quote here. Right? Good. So this is what we call running into a quote. And it's something that people will say, well, I need to introduce them first, so then I'll just hook the quote on. No, 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 no. It's really ugly. You got to end that first sentence, complete the paraphrase, make it be a transition to the quote. It'll even make the quote better, make the quote stand out more, as the example as I gave up before here. Okay, next I went over this presentation and suggested that you should also look at it and see what's wrong. Do you notice the problem here? Oops. Commas and periods always go inside quotation marks. Do you notice the problem here? Question marks and exclamation marks. The problem is, what do they pertain to? To the whole sentence or just the quote? Or when you have a quote within a quote, maybe that. It pertains to the entire quotation, so it goes inside the big quote, but outside of the single quote. Now that he's a statesman, what he really wants to be is what most reporters are. Now he's a statesman, so he really wants to be what most reporters are. Adult delinquents, said Peggy Noonan. Here's the problem right in here, right? Do we have a period before attribution? No, it's always a comma. Therefore, it's always a lowercase s in said. And this would be an example of inverted attribution, said Peggy Noonan, a columnist for the Wall Street Journal. There would be no problem with writing said columnist Peggy Noonan. Sorry, from writing Peggy Noonan said, or columnist Peggy Noonan said, and then in the next sentence saying, Noonan, who writes for the Wall Street Journal, I saw people running, then the big guy in the yellow hat swerved and smashed into me. I didn't see anything else. Here's the problem here. Is it really a problem? I think it would be okay, but honestly, since you're changing actions here between people running, a big guy, then something else happened, this would be a good reason, and your textbook suggests this should be done. For attribution, you go after the first sentence of the quotation, and then you just run the rest of the sentence as a quote, which is implied that person is speaking. So it's not breaking a quote. It's breaking a quote, but only at a period. That's an important thing. Newspaper is a device for making ignorant people. This is the whole he and said and separating them. Don't separate them. Okay, we would instead make an inverted attribution, as I said before in my earlier example. I'm hoping you stop the video at any of these you want to look at. Here's an unusual situation you won't run into very much, but imagine a meeting where you're doing dialogue, the snappy back and forth from one person to the next. And it's important you want to keep exactly their words in the order that they spoke them, in dialogue back and forth and back and forth. Well, you have to have a way to say the speaker has changed before they get into that quotation. And you do it like this. I don't like to catch my eggs one bit. Dorfman's said. Holland replied, comma. So there's a comma before the quote also, and then you can say Dorfman disagreed, comma, next, and then Holland angrily said, replied again, da 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 da. So in dialogue, quick back and forths. But our stories aren't usually like that. And honestly, there's not much reason for dialogue unless the exact back and forth over a little period of time. Short stuff is useful. We usually just take the quotation and put it in context and give it background and description and narrative. Here's the problem of breaking a quote but not at a period. All right? The power of accurate observation is commonly called cynicism by those who have not got it. Said a very cynical guy, George Bernard Shaw, and hilarious guy too, if you get a chance to read him. Okay, but the problem is we've broken a thought. We don't break a thought, put the attribution at the end. And then, again, put the attribution at the end. And we don't use stated, we would just use said. And when it's obvious who is speaking and it's the same person speaking, we probably don't need attribution on the second quotation. I'll let you look at that example. And there's more attribution problems, but that's enough for now. So I'll leave it there and tell you about the assignment. This is the assignment that I'll let you read through. What you're going to do is, right here is just lots of tips and reminders. And something I didn't get to and describe is this whole, you're going to be dealing with ages and hometowns and states. Remember, states are never abbreviated. Ages are always numbers. When you write them as a descriptor or as a single unit, like the 19-year-old or 19-year-old Jenna White, they get hyphens. So this is a little description of that stuff, since some of this does have to do with attribution in a way, and it is something additional for you to learn. And you should look it up in your style book, because there's a whole section on ages and hometowns and stuff like that. And there's general tips and reminders about all the stuff I kind of went over here, right? And it says on the next page is a piece of text. And here it is, this piece of text here. What I want you to do is, I want you to print this out. If you're not working in class, you have to print it out yourself. And I want you to mark it up, indicate all the errors that you can. You're going to take a picture of that or scan it. That's one of the things you're going to submit into the Dropbox. It's due in 1 week. Then I want you to rewrite this, fixing those errors. All right? And then that's the document you submit as a Word document or a PDF, also in the same Dropbox. This is the attribution assignment, and it is due in 1 week from today's class. I hope that's clear. Good luck to you, and let me know if there's any questions.